Hi everyone, my name is Christina Thompson Yates. Thanks to District Divas for organising this event and for inviting me to deliver this presentation today. So for the last 3 years, I have been part of the Triple Point Investment Management team delivering the Heat Networks investment project. To give you a bit of background into my role, I am part of the comms team and have had the privilege of working with several individual projects over the last 3 years who have secured funding under HNIP. Our goal has always been to raise awareness of the funding that has been delivered through the scheme, but also promote the projects themselves as best as possible. I'll start by just showing you some of the logos of the local councils and private sector projects who we have awarded funding through HNIP and who we have worked with to develop press releases and other marketing materials to showcase the projects. So today I thought I might try to give a bit of insight into my experience working with these projects to attract the interest of media and really shout about the schemes. I'll try to be as honest as possible in regard to what has worked and what has not worked so well, and to really share some insight into what has changed over the last 3 years in how we've engaged with the media. So I'd first like to start by saying that back in the beginning of HNIP, when we first started to engage press, most of our comms was focused on actually raising awareness of heat networks overall. So we were answering questions such as, what are they? Why are they important? How do they work? And why is the government investing in them in the first place? We're now at the stage, and probably have been for some time, where the benefits of heat networks are more widely known, which of course helps us to gain media interest and attention, but it also means that we can shout a lot more about the exciting aspects of the schemes. So be it the technologies that they're using, the buildings they will heat, or the ambitions to expand or further decarbonise the heat network over time. So if you're watching this presentation, thinking about how you might want to showcase your heat network project, probably the first question you have in your mind is who to engage. So hopefully I can shed a bit of light onto that today. So typically we have worked with projects wherever funding has been awarded to put together press releases aimed at local, national and trade media. So over time, we have built up quite an extensive media list, which seems to keep on growing. But I would say that the quality of your list is more important than the number of people on your list. So I've categorised some examples of what's worked into 3 different segments, being local, national and trade press. So starting with local press, I think this is probably the easiest list of contacts to think about whenever you are preparing a press release. If your heat network scheme is based in Manchester, you don't need me to tell you that it's likely to attract the attention of press in Manchester rather than elsewhere. But the story you might want to tell probably needs to be tailored somewhat so that it focuses on the type of things that they'll be interested in. So what impact will the scheme have on people in Manchester? What historic buildings will it connect to? And is there another story to tell that speaks to the history of the place in some way? So as an example, North East media outlets were really keen to pick up the story of 2 heat networks, Seaham Garden Village and the Gateshead District Energy Scheme. So both of these will draw on clean, underused heat from abandoned mines. And this was a really strong story for the North East. It clearly conjures up that image of mines which once drove the Industrial Revolution, now leading the Green Revolution and leaving a lasting legacy behind. And it really helped to capture the attention of the press focused in that particular area of the country for that reason. Aside from this example, just probably worth mentioning that heat networks in Cardiff and Bridgend also did really well with the Welsh press, with the focus on being on the projects being the first to be awarded funding in Wales under HNIP, but also on their importance in meeting climate targets in Wales, where a high proportion of homes are in rural areas and decarbonisation of heat is a particular challenge. From our experience, I will say that it is easier to capture the attention of local press in some areas compared to others. We found that London is perhaps a bit more difficult due to so much going on. But moving on to national press, this is definitely a tougher nut to crack. But if your heat network is worth shouting about, and I'm sure it is, and you can pitch it in the right way, it's definitely possible. It's also easier to capture national interest in recent years now that awareness has grown and people are more interested in the idea of a low carbon economy. And there has, of course, been lots of announcements from the government in recent years, such as the net zero legislation, the heat and building strategy, for example. So you can use those big announcements to kind of piggyback and to recognise that there's an interest in this, the way that we get to a low carbon economy, and that your heat network is part of that solution. So for national press, from my own experience, I would say it's a great idea to think about who would be interested in your scheme and why. So think about the environmental correspondents you should be reaching out to from the BBC, ITV's, Telegraph, for example, and have a look at what they have covered recently. Have they touched on heat networks very briefly within another story, for example, or would they be interested in more information and a real life case study that you can share with them? National press also seem to be interested in innovative technologies or anything that they can see and film. This has been a challenge for us since most HNIT funded projects are in their early stages and don't have anything to show, or at least nothing to show that it looks exciting. We've got lots of pictures of pipes, but the press seem to want something a bit more when they're filming something anyway. But I would say that if you are in the position to do a show and tell, that's definitely an opportunity worth jumping on. The example that I've chosen here for what has worked well with national press is the Swap and Prior Community Heat Project. This went down really well. The press have shown a real interest in the idea that a collection of villagers have come together to lead the way with eco-heating by proposing a heat network scheme to replace oil heating. So this is a rural village. I think there's 300 villages there in Swap and Prior, which is a village in Cambridgeshire, and it's a real story of the people who have come together to kind of propose and deliver this low carbon option. So this has done really well and was picked up by the BBC and ITV, amongst others. Probably also worth saying that the Northeast projects that I mentioned earlier were also really well received by national press as well, and I think that's because of, again, the story of the people and the minds, and also the fact that it's an innovative technology. So think about what sets your project apart and how you can really pitch that to national press. The last segment is trade press. So this is definitely easier than national press, because you can pick and choose who has an interest in what, really. So what we've found works well is to focus on the technologies being used, and we have grouped similar schemes together to really capture the interest in that regard. So earlier this year, for example, we published a press release that announced funding awards to 3 separate local councils. So that's 3 separate heat network schemes that all use that will all use heat pumps. So we published this press release after the launch of the heat and building strategy, which emphasised the use of heat pumps in the delivery of low carbon heat. So there was already that interest in heat pumps. Trade press were already talking about that. So we made sure that we sent that press release to those people that were focused on low carbon heating or that had an interest in heat pumps specifically, and it went down really well. So you can see there were just trade press alone, really, that was like over 60 pieces of coverage, and over the lifetime of that coverage we could see that story reach up to 4 million people. So yeah, I think we thought that went really well, and we will continue probably to group things together in that way. So I think that's all from me in terms of sharing examples. But before I go, I'd just like to say that regardless of whether or not you have spoken to us before, whether you have received HNIT funding, or if you're considering Green Heat Network funding, then we would always encourage you to contact us and help so that we can help promote your project as well. So you can visit our website and fill in the contact form to join our mailing list, or even just drop us an email at comms@tp-heatnetworks.org. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much.